Welcome to the Man-at-Arms Black Market. If you're here for the Fury song, you're in the right place. I'm Matt.
I'm Kerry.
We are the Stagmer brothers of Baltimore Knife and Sword. We're going to be building some of your favorite weapons, and some weapons that you've never seen before.
This is Man-at-Arms, Reforged. Right in the middle of deciding what to build this season, Call of Duty dropped the Fury song. We knew this was a sword we were going to have to build. We began looking at a way we could also make it bulletproof.
Okay, so I have the blade picture fed into AutoCAD, doing tracing of the perimeter right now. Then I'm gonna hand it off to Kerry and John. They're gonna go ahead and get it programmed down there and get it cut out on the CNC. We sized the blade to 35 inches. In the game, it looks to be like a one-handed sword, but we wanna make it really big and bad. Still gonna be a one-handed size, but it's gonna be massive. It's gonna do a lot of damage. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull just the blade portion out here so you can see it. Clean this up a little bit. Boom. Ready to cut it out on the plasma.
Since our Call of Duty sword is a modern build, we figured it'd be pretty cool to cut the blade out of some modern material. Here we're going to use a sheet of AR500, which is abrasion-resistant ballistic sheet steel. Basically, bulletproof armor plating. So, due to the expense of cutting out of that, we went ahead and cut a sheet metal template as a dry run. Make sure everything turned out okay the way we want it. Everything looks good. So now we'll go ahead and cut the real thing.
This is actually the first time we've plasma cut AR500. We have to use the plasma because this material is very difficult and requires carbide cutters.
Well, it plasma cut out okay. Now let's see if Matt can grind this.
All right, we got our massive blade cut out now. Getting ready to start grinding. I've never ground on this material before. Really don't know how this is gonna grind, but what I do know is this material is extremely abrasion resistant. So what I'm gonna use is our brand new Kling Spore belts. They're ceramic belts, so they're really evil. One thing you have to do when you're using these belts is make sure you have a respirator. So we're gonna start tackling this thing now. I'm gonna start by profile, and then I'm gonna get right into doing some edge grinding. Grinding pre-hardened material, it's very important to keep it cool, not let it overheat and ruin your temper. So I'm going to the coolant a lot more often than I normally would on Man-at-Arms, and I'm just gonna stay at it, keep it nice and cool. I need a little break, so I'm gonna hand it off to Kerry to do the machining of the word Olympia on the flat of the blade. All I gotta do is do a little tracing and then hand that program off to him and he'll get it carved out. Let's see what we got. Looks good to me.
So doing this engraving, we're going to start with a fairly small cutter. We're going to go very light on our depth, do a couple of different passes. I have an odd feeling that we're going to dull this cutter pretty quickly, and then once we have the depth of the piece, we'll put a brand new cutter in and sharpen up all the detail.
All right, at this point we now have the bulk of our edges ground in. Kerry went ahead and milled the Olympia on the flat of the blade, looks really good. Now I gotta really slow things down and take my time and do some more of the intricate grinding on the spine here. I gotta start adding these back bevels on each one of our serrations. I'm gonna go to the 80 grit instead of the 24 grit and make those bevels nice and perfect. It's now time to start the guard portion of this sword build. I'm gonna work from a different drawing because this drawing's off angle a little bit. It was easy enough to do the math and calculate and make the blade work, but for the guard, it's gonna be a little bit of a struggle. So I'm gonna use the attach command. Found a good screenshot of the guard. It's a nice, flat, dead-on picture. So I'm gonna go ahead and start tracing that. I'm gonna go ahead and get those cut out on the plasma cutter, get a little shape to them, weld them on, and it'll look like one fluid piece, and it'll be awesome.
Now that we've cut the first half of the Call of Duty guard, everything fits up real nice. We're going to go ahead and cut the other half.
My next step is to start removing some of the dross left from the plasma cut. Then I'm gonna move to the slack sander and I'm gonna bevel all of these spikes. It's gonna add some more depth to that look and make them look a lot more aggressive. All right, my next step that I have to do is use my handy dandy handheld belt sander to go ahead and start cleaning up this inside ring. I gotta take off this little nip that's left from the lead in, lead out from the plasma cutter and just blend this whole thing smooth. All right, the next thing I have to do is remove the amount of material that's left from the lead in, lead out inside our grooves on our blade. I'm gonna start with a carbide cutter on a rotary tool. It's just gonna save me a lot of time, and then I'm gonna clean everything up with the file.
So on this sword, I know you've seen there's a very bright blue ring here. We're going to be using this LED headlight ring. It's a 70mm ring, so it's a bit larger. It's going to sit from behind. And then we're going to use this acrylic. We're going to cut a new diffuser that fits in here that'll allow the light to show through past from where the metal is.
All right, so I now have the base of my perimeter bevels all established. It's time to start working on some of the more risky parts. Gotta get in on this little groove and add some bevels all the way around. I'm gonna do that using the slack sander. It's kind of dangerous. I'm gonna have to stick a really sharp blade all the way inside this machine. So I'm just gonna take my time and get at it.
So on this sword, with the light, we need to relieve a large area here so that the light ring can fit in and I can put it in the plexiglass. I'm using a solid carbide cutter on this abrasion resistant steel. I've done some test cuts. It's actually very abusive to the cutter. So I'm going to use a roughing cutter. You can see the little grooves in it. Allows it to really take out the material, hog it out. And then I'll use this finishing cutter afterwards. I'll go back and recut everything to give myself a nice smooth area.
With the two guard pieces clamped to the blade, I heat up the tips with a torch and bend them over to shape. They're now ready to have the ends welded and become one solid piece. So I've already run most of the edges through the grits at this point. The way this blade is depicted in the game, the edge has really rough grit left in it. I could leave it like that, but we want this thing to really slice. So I'm gonna polish through on the 220, move to the Scotch-Brite, and then it'll be good to go. In the game, this sword has a very tactical handle. I'm gonna do it in 2 pieces. I'm gonna use a polyethylene high density plastic. I'm gonna sandwich that around the tang. Then I'm gonna use some thermal plastic, also known as Warbler, to wrap around and create our second level. I'm just gonna trace it twice because we're gonna sandwich the handle, so we need 2 pieces. Like that. Now I'm gonna move to our little mini bandsaw here and just cut 2 slabs. You've seen us use a narrow wheel on our grinders to do a lot of detailing. In this case, I'm going to use one of those wheels with a flat surface and just hog some material off where our tang needs to fit. Okay, now that I got my tang recessed, sanded on both sides and all the way through, I clamped the 2 pieces together, lined up those 2 slots. Now we're going to start shaping it. With my handle shape now roughed in, I can move to the narrow wheel and start adding in those little grooves. Once I get my overlay added, this handle's gonna be spot on. Examining our 3D rendering of this blade, I now know exactly the pattern I have to lay out on our Warbler before I can start cutting. Now that I got my template all worked out, I'm gonna heat this up with a heat gun and just form it to shape. You can see as I heat it up on the low setting of this heat gun, it goes from a stiff plastic to almost liquid. All right, so I have a little excess to trim. I'll use a razor knife, get in there, trim that off, do a little shrinking in some parts, but yeah, really like the way that looks.
So we finally have all the components for this sword together. Light, diffuser that I lathe turned. This is our overlay plate. Holds everything in place. Wires will come up the handle. You can see the glow. We'll mask this off so nothing shows. And it'll give us the look of the piece. Handle in place. Just a couple more fittings, and we're good to go. Even in a shop where we work with so many different materials, working with this AR500 plate was quite difficult. From the grinding to the milling to the welding and finish work, in the end we were quite glad to be able to add both the AR500 plate to our list and the Fury Song to our arsenal. If you guys are Man-at-Arms fans or sword fans in general, this is the game for you. Click on the trailer below and download it now.